Hello, this is Andy Tufano with Gold Star Training, and this is Raising the Bar. And today we have a special guest in studio, Henrie Watkins from Specialized Safety Services, and we're glad to have Henrie here today. Henrie's going to talk to us about bleed care. So before we get going, let me just tell you a little bit about Henrie Watkins. Henrie Watkins began his 30-year career as a firefighter, and he later progressed to the field of emergency management. As a principal in his firm, Specialty Safety Services, Mr. Watkins provides services to top-ranked colleges, universities, medical centers, and Fortune 100 businesses. Mr. Watkins has also provided services to the U.S. Congress, Department of Homeland Security, and foreign governments. In addition to his undergraduate work at Claremont Colleges and graduate work at UCLA, Mr. Watkins holds numerous emergency management certificates and is a subject matter expert in terrorism and active violence. Mr. Watkins has responded to hundreds of actual instances including national-level disasters. And I will just tell you, I've known Henrie for about 10 years. I consider him a friend. And he is certainly an expert at public safety, and in this case, bleed care. And we're glad to have Henrie Watkins here with us today. So welcome, Henrie.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
Well, we're glad you're here. We're going to start off with a few videos here to start off, and then we're going to play the videos, and then what we'll do is Henrie and I are going to talk about these videos, and we'll comment on them, and we're going to get Henrie's expertise. Henrie also brought in a tourniquet today, so we're going to talk about tourniquet use. But I will just tell you, from being in the public safety industry for almost 30 years now, the idea of bleed care is a very important thing that all public safety personnel and really anybody who is going to be in emergency management should be well aware of and should know how to apply a tourniquet. Let's face it, it doesn't take long for an open wound to bleed out. And again, once that bleeding occurs, there's a really short window of opportunity to stop the bleeding and actually save their lives. So we're going to take a look at 3 videos. The first video that we're going to take a look at today is going to be titled, Why You Need to Stop the Bleeding Right Away. So let's do this, Henrie. Let's look at the video, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it, okay?
Okay.
So we're going to go to the video.
If you see somebody and you're like, wow, that's a lot of blood, or wow, that's a lot of bleeding, you should do something. That's significant bleeding. What happens is it's all about the amount of blood loss. We have a set amount of blood in our bodies, based on your size and other things. Generally 5 to 6 liters of blood. We know from medical science and studies at what point your body starts to have not enough, blood, to the point where it's causing physiologic problems, it's causing problems. That starts around 500 cc, about half a liter to a liter of blood. Once we get below, if you've lost 2 liters of blood, and 3 to 5 minutes is pretty fast to lose that amount. It's more like probably 10 to 15 minutes in bad bleeds. But once you get to that point, and then beyond that, potentially you can go into a state of what we call irreversible shock. And essentially, if the tank doesn't have enough gas in it to keep the engine running, irreversible shock is irreversible. Which means it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter how good your trauma center is. It doesn't matter how good your doctors are. It doesn't matter how good your paramedics are. It doesn't matter. Once you start that physiologic process of irreversible shock, it continues. We can't break that cycle, and you will die, or the person will die. The only treatment for irreversible shock is prevention of irreversible shock. Don't let them get to that point. That blood belongs in the body. It doesn't belong on the street. Right? It belongs in the body. So let's keep it there. No matter how we do it, let's keep it there.
This fire captain talked about the importance of stopping the bleeding right away, and he also mentioned the fact that there's irreversible damage that occurs. Can you kind of talk about that and kind of how quickly we need to actually act to stop bleeding?
Yes, the human body holds about 6 liters of blood in a healthy person, and that's give or take depending on your size. Once you start bleeding, a person can lose about 500 cc's, and it's a serious bleed, but it's not going to be a fatal bleed. Once you get to the point of loss of 2 liters of blood, you go into what's called irreversible shock. So at that point, it doesn't matter what care you get, what trauma center you go to, what surgeon you see, there's really no way of saving your life if you've already lost 2 liters of blood, which is why stopping the bleed is so important. It has to be done right away.
Now, I assume it depends upon the type of injury, but I mean, how quickly could someone bleed out to the point where they're going to lose a half of cc or a liter? I mean, how quickly can that happen?
Well, according to the United States College of Surgeons, they believe that you can lose 2 liters of blood in 2 minutes or less, depending on the size of the injury. Now, the typical bleed, it would take you roughly about 5 to 10 minutes to bleed that much out. But again, remember, when a person gets hurt, they don't just get hurt in one place. If you're shot, the average number of gunshots you sustain, or 2.7 if you're going to survive, 3.4 if you're not going to survive. Average car accident, you get multiple bleeds. If you are the victim of some kind of fall, you get multiple bleeds. So while it may take you 10 minutes with 1 bleed, with 2 bleeds, you're at 5 minutes. With 3 bleeds, you're at 3 minutes.
Wow.
So it doesn't take very much for a very small bleed to become a very big problem.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Of course, time here is of the essence. Great. Let's do this. Let's go to our second video here called A Perfect Stranger. And the thing I really like about this video, it talks about how important the bystander is. And let's look at the video, and then again, we'll come back and we'll talk about it. Let's go to the video.
It was a little strange to sit down to someone that you've never met before and decide that you're going to grab their hand and tell them everything is okay.
I screamed. That's all I remember doing at that moment. I knew I was going to wreck.
I remember feeling like we had to do something immediately right now.
The day started out like any other day. Wasn't cold, wasn't hot. My friend called me that morning and he said, I'm gonna take out my Harley and you got your new bike. And so let's just go out and have some fun.
All of a sudden, I see the woman on the motorcycle just flying through the air. I just remember saying, stop the car.
I remember getting thrown headfirst over the motorcycle. And I heard them say, don't move, please don't move. Blood was streaming down and it went on into the gutter. There's still the mark of the blood.
And then when we pulled up and saw her, blood was rushing down out of her leg and into the gutter. My husband's cousin took his shirt off and immediately started applying pressure to stop the bleeding.
Camille was holding my hand. I remember that distinctly. She was saying, you're gonna be okay. And to hear those words were so important.
I really feel bystanders have a responsibility to act. Don't be afraid. You're not going to hurt yourself. You're not going to hurt the patient. All you'll do is help, even if it's just a comforting hand.
Doing something that's better than doing nothing. That helps us more than they would ever realize. That can make all the difference between life and death.
If you imagine yourself in a situation where you've been in an accident, you're vulnerable, you're frightened, think about what you would want.
Okay, good. Well, Henrie, let's talk about this perfect stranger. In this video, obviously, we see 2 young women who became somewhat best friends here. One was involved in a very serious motorcycle accident, and then, of course, as a bystander, jumped into action and actually helped save this woman's life. It talks about the importance of bystander. Talk to us a little bit about how important it is for people, forget public safety personnel or trained emergency management personnel, but just an ordinary citizen bystander, the importance of them getting involved.
The biggest thing I got from this video is the fact that a normal everyday person was able to save a life. And the fact that paramedics did arrive in the normal 8-minute response time illustrated that it wouldn't have been fast enough to save her life. She needed what her now best friend did, which is to stop the bleeding. And so we really see a push across the United States of normal citizens learning the very easy technique of applying tourniquets, packing wounds, and applying chest seals, all of which are life-saving interventions that end up saving a person's life in that vital 2-minute window.
Now, what is the number one factor in your mind that keeps people from getting involved? I mean, why won't people get involved here?
I would say there are two factors. The first factor is fear of hurting the patient.
Okay.
And you have to keep in mind that that patient's going to die unless you intervene.
Right.
If you step back and do nothing, the problem will solve itself and that patient will bleed out and die.
Right.
All you can do at that point is make it better. You can't make it worse because they're already on the path towards death. The second problem, I think, is that people, especially in California, are afraid of legal liability. And you should know that in California and in all the rest of the states of the United States, there is something called the Good Samaritan Law, which gives you indemnity, which basically covers you if you apply care to someone, and even if that person dies, you are covered under an indemnity, meaning you can't really be sued successfully because you tried to save their lives. So you have that legal protection built into the law of all 50 states.
Right. Now, how do we get people, bystanders, just again, non-trained, just people going about their business, when they see these accidents or they see these interactions and they see someone injured, how do we get them to be motivated to kind of get involved? I mean, I assume there's some ways for us and to help them become more informed about getting involved and stuff. What are some of the resources that you're aware of that kind of can help educate the basic, better understanding of this?
There are a number of videos on the FEMA website called Stop the Bleed or Bleed Care. And you can Google them on YouTube. You can get online and see the web pages about that. But I think the best message I can give is that the last video we're going to show is a 30-second video. It's actually 30 seconds long. And it shows the application of a tourniquet, which is something that you would apply to any extremity that had a major bleed, and it actually saves lives. And so you can literally learn how to do this in 30 seconds.
Good.
So if you want to show the video,
Yeah.
and I can talk about it a little bit.
Let's go to
after.
the video, and great segue, Henry. Let's go to the video, and then we'll talk about it when we get back. We saw a tourniquet, an actual tourniquet being used in this environment. Tell us a little bit more about this video and what it demonstrates for us.
Yeah, to your earlier question about how we get people involved, I think one of the things that we need to be very conscious of is that in an emergency, people lose a lot of technical knowledge and they kind of go to gross motor skills
Right.
and muscle memory.
Right.
What is it that I really know how to do, and how fast can I do it, and how easy can I do it? In the last video, we saw the application of what they call a SWAT-T tourniquet. And that tourniquet is unique in that it works on little arms and big arms. Most of the tourniquets that are out there are designed for military size arms, which are bigger and take quite a bit of strength to use. The SWAT-T is unique because not only does it work on small arms, but it's very easy to apply. All you do, as the video showed you, is you wrap it tight, wrap it tight. How do you know the tourniquet's working? The guy stops bleeding.
Right.
If he doesn't stop bleeding, you need to wrap it tighter. So it's a very simple technique to use. It's intuitive. You don't need a lot of training.
Good.
And the instructions on how to use the tourniquet are actually on the tourniquet. So there isn't separate instructions you need to have. You just look at that tourniquet, stretch it until the triangles turn into different shapes, and you
Good.
know the tourniquet's working.
So arms and legs as well.
Arms and legs as well.
Okay.
Extremities are great places for tourniquets.
Okay.
A natural question we get all the time is, what happens if I'm bleeding someplace other than my arms
Right.
and
Good
my
question.
legs?
Right.
You know, if I'm bleeding in my neck, I cannot apply a tourniquet to the neck. And so we use a different technique, and that's called wound packing. Many people learned a long time ago in their first aid class to apply direct pressure to a wound.
Right, right.
And as science advanced, we learned as a society that Direct pressure doesn't work on real big bleeds. We need to actually pack the wound, which means putting the dressing inside of the wound to the point where no more blood's coming out.
Right.
And so we literally just stuff the bandage
Plug
in
the
the
leak,
wound.
basically.
We plug the leak until they're not leaking anymore.
Right.
Okay? And then another technique, it's really coming into its own now, is what we call chest seals, the use of chest seals. And we know that between our chin and our belly button are lungs. And if we get a hole between our chin and the belly button, we're not so much concerned about blood, but air loss, right? Because our lungs hold all the oxygen.
Right.
And so if we get a hole there, what we want to do is basically apply a chest seal, which is a fancy term for a sticker.
Right.
It's an airtight sticker like we patch an inner tube. You just peel one side off, you put it where the hole is, and it covers the hole, and it enables that patient to continue breathing.
Good.
Now, I'm oversimplifying, but the application is roughly that simple.
Good. Okay, so then also you brought a tourniquet with you, so why don't we do this? Let's take just a quick break, and then we'll come back with the tourniquet, and we'll have kind of Henrie demonstrate that for us. Okay, we're back with Henrie, and he actually has a tourniquet here. He's going to demonstrate how that works on me, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, Henrie.
So if I can have your right arm, hold it out.
My right arm's coming out.
Okay. What we're going to do here is we're going to simulate an injury close to the wrist. And a tourniquet should always go between the injury and the heart. It should never go over a joint because it doesn't work well there. Okay. So what we're going to do is between the elbow and the injury, apply a tourniquet. Now, I brought a SWAT T tourniquet, and you'll see on the SWAT T, it has the instructions right on the device itself. It's real simple to apply. All I'm going to do is start wrapping the arm around and around and around. And every time I go, I'm going to make it a little bit tighter. Now, I'm not going to go too tight on you because of demonstration.
Nope.
But I know this is working when he stops bleeding.
Right.
And there's no complicated twist or turns. It's a real simple circular motion. When I'm done with the tourniquet, I simply tuck it inside itself, and he should stop bleeding.
Very nice. Now, this strikes me, this kind of looks like an inner tube. Is this kind of the same material or something similar to an inner tube?
It's something similar to an inner tube. The reason this works so well is because it can be stored in almost any weather condition, hot or cold. It's also very small. You notice that when it was wrapped up in my arms, it's something very small and completely lightweight. I think it weighs less than 2 or 3 ounces. So it's something that everybody can have on them, especially security officers. You know, I see a lot of security officers walking around now with batons and handcuffs, and you ask that security officer, when's the last time you used your handcuffs, or when's the last time you used your baton? And they'll say, never.
Almost never.
Yeah,
Right.
never. But a tourniquet is something that we know will save lives, and that we know is being used every day across the nation to save lives, not just because of shooters or active violence, because of car accidents, because of industrial accidents, because of falls, and that kind of thing.
Now, tell us again the difference between the ones we often see police officers carry. It looks like a little T and a twist versus this one. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between
those
those
are
two?
typically referred to as Cat T tourniquets, is the biggest brand out there in the markets. Cat T has been adapted by the military, and so every person in the military, no matter what branch, is issued this tourniquet. And a lot of science went into that. They knew that if we were going to save a person in the military in a war environment, we needed to apply these tourniquets immediately, which is why they gave them to everybody, not just the medics. But the Cat T or similar tourniquets are designed for very big arms, for people who are in combat, who have bigger arms and bigger legs. When you try to apply them to a child, when you try to apply it to a woman who has a smaller arm, those tourniquets don't get tight enough to actually occlude the bleeding, and they're very hard to apply if you have small hands or don't have the strength in your arms to tighten it down enough. These solve the problem because all you're doing is going in circles. Yeah.
And imagine under stress that this seems like a very simple item to apply.
Yes.
And maybe the other types under stress may be a little bit more complicated. Like you said, fine motor skills versus gross motor skills. I'm feeling it now, so we're probably going to have to end pretty soon before I fall out, but I do appreciate the fact that you applied this tourniquet to me. So Henrie, I really want to thank you for coming in today because this is a very helpful presentation today with bleed care. I think in the public safety community, all officers should be, this should be just standard gear for all of them, and a very simple idea, and saving lives is a very important part of what we all do. So I would like to just mention Henrie's organization again is Specialized Safety Services, and his website is specializedsafetyservices.info. That's info. Henrie Watkins. And also, as a reminder, follow us on Facebook. You can go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. It's Gold Star Training. And again, this is Andy Tufano with Gold Star Training, and this is an episode of Raising the Bar. Thanks for joining us today.